This program has been criticized ever since its inception. You haven't mended it. You're talking about mending it today. Where is your bill to mend it? Is there a bill to amend it? Have you introduced it? Is there a bill?
Gentleman yield.
I will yield.
Finally, yes, we are introducing legislation to make sure that the taxpayers are off the hook.
You will be?
Yeah, we've introduced a bill to say to restore a program, a provision that was knocked out by Republicans.
You will. The gentleman saying you will be?
It has been filed.
What, today? Was it filed today? Monday?
No, last week.
What?
Last week. If the gentleman doesn't want to...
2 years. 2 years.
If the gentleman does not want an answer, apparently.
I take back my time.
Yield?
$1,000 million and $29 billion of authorization, 2 years of a failed program, and the week before we come to the floor, you file a bill. You file a bill. I'm sorry.
Gentleman won't yield.
To say to the ranking member that you can file the bill, we'll take a look at it, but we're ending this failure. I yield back the balance of my time.
I yield myself 2 minutes, and I regret the ranking member's, the chairman's refusal to allow me to answer the question he asked. Yes, we just filed the bill because we are restoring a provision that was in the financial reform bill. The gentleman who has shown very little regard for the taxpayer in his own vote, sending money to Brazilian cotton farmers. And by the way, I wish he had listened to Secretary Gates and Admiral Mullen and not voted to force on them money for weapon systems they didn't want. They said those things when they tried to get the Congress not to give them weapons they didn't want, but many of my Republican friends, majority, disregarded that. But in the TARP legislation, we said that in 2013, when this program ends, any penny that was spent and not returned to the taxpayers will come from the banks, will come from the hedge funds. And we can anticipate Republican opposition to that because in the financial reform bill last summer, already passed, not recently introduced, we said that for many of these programs to recover the cost of the foreclosure mitigation and dealing with the results of foreclosure, we would get it from large financial institutions. And the Republicans objected to that, and the Republicans insisted in the Senate that it be knocked out. So every time we have tried to get money from the large financial institutions to pay for the cost of the damage their irresponsibility inflicted, the Republicans have opposed it. And I wish again that when it came to Brazilian cotton farmers or weapons the Pentagon didn't want or infrastructure in Afghanistan or Iraq security forces, all of things the gentleman from Alabama voted for to come out of the taxpayers' hide, and then he votes against and opposes our legislation already passed and just reintroduced to have the large financial institutions pay for this. So his concern for taxpayers comes into play when we're trying to help people who are in need, but it's not in play when we're talking about heavy defense contractors, Brazilian and American cotton farmers, or the large financial institutions, because he and his fellow partisans have consistently fought every effort we have made to get the large financial institutions to bear this cost. But we do have still in the TARP, as people will hear later, provisions to do that.
Gentleman reserves. The gentlewoman from Illinois is recognized.
May I request again the time, Mr.
The gentlewoman
Chairman?
from Illinois has 5 minutes. The gentleman from Massachusetts has 15.5 minutes.
Then I would reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
I will yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from North Carolina.
The gentleman from North Carolina is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to oppose this bill, but I do so with mixed feelings because I have been one of the critics of the HAMP program. The members of the majority have pointed out correctly that this program has been widely criticized for more than 2 years. It has been criticized by the Congressional Oversight Panel, by the SIGTARP, the Special Inspector General for the Troubled Assets Recovery Program, by La Raza, by Elizabeth Warren, and yes, by me. But I have not criticized it for the reasons that the gentleman from Alabama gave. If this bill is keeping a promise, it is not a promise made in open to the American people. It is keeping a promise made in secret to the banks, because the costs of this program are not going to come out of the pockets of the American people. This comes out of the TARP program, and that legislation said that any money not recovered by 2013 has to be recovered from the financial industry. And whoever's president in 2013 has to propose to Congress exactly how it is we're going to get that money back. They can afford it. 30% of all corporate profits are in the financial sector. They can more than afford it. The gentleman from Alabama frequently says that he hates visiting debt on his grandchildren, and I believe him when he says it, but I have good news for him. Unless his grandchildren take a job on Wall Street in the next 2 years, they are not going to have to pay this debt. This debt, if Congress does keep its promise to the American people, will not come from the American people. It will come from Wall Street. It will come from the people who created the mess that we are now trying to clean up. But I have criticized this program because it is not as effective as it should be. It has gone on for 2 years. It is not what we need. The problem, however, has not been what government has made banks do, and this program has been run by the banks. It has not been run by the government. It's been run by the banks. Every horror story about a homeowner being abused is being abused by a bank, the bank handling the mortgage, not by the Department of the Treasury, not by the federal government. So, of course, when they come to see a Republican member of Congress, the Republican member of Congress says, oh, isn't it terrible what the federal government made that poor bank do to you? No, the federal government didn't make the banks do that. My criticism of this program and my criticism of the Obama administration and how they've run this program is not that they've made banks do what they've done, but they have let banks do what they've done. This program can work if there are some tough rules that are really enforced, tough on the banks. Mr. Frank mentioned earlier the bankruptcy proposal 3 years ago. I introduced that bill. I have been trying to put rules, requirements on the banks that they let people out. They try to begin to let people out in a very orderly, logical, fair way through judges, through a judicial process to begin to get control of the collapse of the housing market. Something has got to happen to stop the continuing fall of housing values. Something has got to happen to end the cycle of foreclosures and diminish home values and more foreclosures. Republicans have offered nothing to do that. We know something can work. We know that we can design a program that will work because it has been done before. In the New Deal, one of the most successful programs in the New Deal was the Homeowners Loan Corporation, which bought mortgages, modified them, worked with homeowners, tailored the mortgages to something the homeowner could buy for those homeowners who really could afford a mortgage, could afford a house, the house they were in, but not the mortgage that they had. And most historians say that program saved the housing market in the Great Depression and saved the middle class. We have got to make something work. There are rules on the horizon. There is now a pending settlement negotiation for the violations of law by the banks and how they've managed mortgages. It is with states' attorney general and it is with the federal regulatory agencies. Some on the Republican side have publicly pressured the federal agencies to lay off the banks. I really cannot tell much difference between what they are doing in the pressure they are putting on banks in an enforcement, on the regulatory agents in an enforcement matter, and what happened a generation ago with the Keating Five. But they're doing it. They're saying, lay off our buddies, the banks. Don't come down too hard on them. But there is a real possibility the result of that settlement will be some tough rules. And there is now rulemaking authority. There is now a cop on the block. The CFPB has the authority to develop rules for banks and how they manage mortgages. But something has to work. This has not been working. It can be fixed. It has to be fixed. Something has to work. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. The gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. The gentlewoman from Illinois is recognized.
I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from North Carolina.
The gentleman from North Carolina is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank my colleague for yielding. And responding to my colleague from North Carolina, Mr. Chairman, I would say that we agree the HAMP program is a failure. And I think there's bipartisan agreement on that. Even the SIGTARP, Mr. Borofsky, says the Treasury Department is so content with the wretched, shameful status quo, they refuse to even acknowledge the program is a failure. We agree it's a failure, although it sounds like at the end of the day he's going to vote to defend a failed program. Secondly, I would remind my colleague that this program actually writes checks to those evil banks that he talks about, with those evil profits that he talks about, to the tune of about $1 billion. So this program is actually cutting checks to banks. Third and finally, that TARP money is actually the taxpayer, the American people's money, not the bank's money. And we deserve to give that money. We owe it to the American people to give them back that money. And I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from Illinois reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
How much time do I have remaining?
The gentleman from Massachusetts has 10.5 minutes.
I yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Ellison.
The gentleman is recognized for 3 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, this bill is just like saying, you know what, you said you were going to give us a loaf of bread, but you only gave us a slice. So because you didn't give us the whole loaf, we're going to take all of the bread away, even the slice. Because the program isn't successful as it could be, we ought to be getting in here and doing something about all the foreclosures across America, as opposed to what the majority wants to do, which is get rid of even the meager program that exists. This is unresponsive government. This is government that is turning its back and folding its arms on the American people. We got 4 million foreclosures and may end up with 7 million, and yet instead of trying to make a program work, we just get rid of the whole thing. This is a really sad day and a big mistake. You know, look, you want to get up here and criticize the HAMP program, you can do that. But you know what? The HAMP program has come up with more than 600,000 active modifications. That's not nearly enough of what we need, but it has done something. Rather than get the program right, we abandon all those people who are underwater, all those people who are in foreclosure. That is a shame and it's wrong. Now, let me say, Mr. Speaker, the fact is that this program, this HAMP program that we're terminating today, this program doesn't do anything to put Americans back to work. It doesn't do anything at all. The Republican majority has been here for 13 weeks, and all they've done is cut programs that could put people to work. They haven't tried to fix anything that's not working. They've just tried to cut back on what America needs, so that we'll be in a position where people aren't working, they won't be paying taxes, we won't be even addressing this deficit because of the Republican no-jobs agenda. It's really too bad. We were sent here to do something about jobs. We were sent here to do something about foreclosures. We're not doing anything about either because the Republican majority refuses to address. You know, one of the biggest problems with the HAMP program, now that we're on that subject, is that we did just allow incentives. We didn't really make the banks do and the services do what they should do, which is to readjust these mortgages. And people bought at bubble prices based on Republican majority decisions to not regulate, to abandon consumer protection, and this bubble market created expansive and big prices. Loans people got. We didn't see consumers get protected from no-doc, low-doc, ninja loans. We didn't see any protection for the American taxpayer with any of these financial regulations involving derivatives, and yet when the bubble bursts, the people are there to try to pick up the pieces. But what does the Republican majority do? They just take away the one slice that maybe might help some people instead of trying to do something to help the American people. And I hope the American people are watching this debate today, Mr. Speaker, because I just hope they take careful note of who is on the side of the American neighborhood, who is on the side of the American people, and who's trying to take it away, that American dream. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. The gentlewoman from Illinois has 4 minutes remaining.
Mr. Chairman, we have no further speakers, and so I would reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman,
Yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from North Carolina.
gentleman from North Carolina is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank the gentleman for yielding. As best I can discern, the argument about the HAMP program is we should terminate it because it's run inefficiently. That seems a fairly strange argument for most of us around here, because we know that there are inefficiencies in every department of the government. If you use that as the touchstone for terminating programs, we would close down the entire Defense Department. We would close down the Department of Commerce. We would close down the Department of Health and Human Services. I mean, we would go right down the list and close them all, because every one of the departments and every program has some inefficiencies in them. You don't solve the problem by closing a program. You solve the problem by trying to correct the problems that exist. And this is a whole new philosophy for this group of people, because when the Securities and Exchange Commission was not equipped to find the Bernie Madoff episode, their answer to it was, let's cut out the SEC, or let's reduce this budget, not make it more efficient so that it could stop the kind of fraud and abuse that was taking place, but let's just starve it to death. And that's the same philosophy that's being applied in this context, Mr. Chairman. Because the program is inefficient, which all of us agree it has been, their answer is, let's close it down. Ours is to make the program more efficient and work for the purposes for which it was intended, and that's what we ought to be devoting our attention to today, not terminating the program. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentlewoman from Illinois is recognized.
I yield 15 seconds to the gentleman from North Carolina.
The gentleman from North Carolina is recognized for 15 seconds.
I would respond to my colleague, Mr. Chairman, that if we can't eliminate this failed program, what program can we eliminate? And I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
I would yield myself our remaining time. I believe there's only one federal speaker. How much?
5 minutes.
Well, let me begin with my friend from North Carolina. $150 million a year to Brazilian cotton farmers, which the gentleman voted for. Now, what we could have done was, instead of giving them I'll yield to the gentleman.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you. I didn't vote for the Farm Bill.
No, the question was not the Farm Bill. It was the amendment from the gentleman from Wisconsin to cut out $150 million that is being voted subsequent to the Farm Bill to the cotton farmers of Brazil. We had an amendment offered by the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Flake, the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Kine, not to pay $150 million a year to Brazilian cotton farmers. Now, we were told that we had to do that because otherwise we'd be in trouble, but we had an alternative. We could have knocked $150 million out of the subsidy to American cotton farmers. That's $300 million a year that we are losing. We have the second engine on the F-35. My friends on the other side, gentleman from Alabama, quoted the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff saying national security is at risk. But then they vote against him and force on him money he doesn't want. The gentleman from Alabama voted for a second engine. The administration, at the request of Secretary Gates, said he'd veto the bill if that had happened. So it does seem to be a little odd to quote the Secretary of Defense and the Admiral, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, about the problems of debt, and then vote for money over their objections. So those are things I would do. Brazilian cotton farmers, I would have limited the amount that we pay others. There's a couple of other major flaws here. But I would yield. We have heard several times from people on the majority side that more people are hurt than helped by HAMP. That appears nowhere in anybody's testimony. Neil Borofsky didn't say it. LaRaza didn't say it. They said some people are hurt. Is anybody, I will yield if the gentleman wants to point to any document that says more people were hurt than helped. I yield.
Gentleman yields.
I'd be happy to accept his yielding. There are 800,000 people that are given temporary modifications, verbal modifications, that are kicked out of the program. Those are the people that have their credit dinged and depleted their savings.
I would ask the gentleman,
according to the Inspector
General. Back my time. The gentleman was talking about, he quoted Borofsky, quoted LaRaza. Those figures are nowhere in there, and their credit is not worse off because they're in the program. That's the fundamental flaw. What they are saying is, and people have said, the gentleman from Illinois, go to the private sector. The problem, by the way, that LaRaza has is that this is too much private sector. LaRaza's problem here is that it leaves too much to the private sector. The private sector does the easy stuff. The notion that more people are hurt than helped is simply non-existent. By the way, we've always heard from my Republican friends that we shouldn't be the nanny state and let people make choices. No one's forced to go into this program. If they can go into another program, they can make it better. Final point I want to make is this. Yes, there is a question about who pays for it. Under the TARP bill that we passed, it is mandated that in 2013 we get money from the financial institutions for this. In the financial reform bill that passed the House, we had a provision that required that that assessment be made right away. In the conference report on financial reform, we had an assessment on the financial institutions, those above $50 billion in assets, except hedge funds above $10 billion. We have had 3 legislative efforts to assess these costs on the financial institutions. The Republicans have opposed every one, unfortunately with some success, although we still have one left. The final point I'd make is this. Yeah, the HAMP program has a lot of problems. Solutions cannot be more elegant than the problems they seek to resolve. The absence of any program leaves people worse off. The Republicans successfully defeated efforts to give bankruptcy powers. They have successfully opposed efforts to make the banks pay for this. So they set up a program which, thanks to them, at least for now, looks like it comes from the taxpayers, although we'll be able to recover that money, which has no leverage over the private sector, and then they object to it. So I would say again, Mr. Chairman, look at the votes on subsidizing Brazilian cotton farmers or a second engine or money for infrastructure in Afghanistan or security in Iraq, billions of dollars collectively in all those programs, which my Republican friends, including the advocates on the other side of killing this program, voted for. We have a program here that will be paid for by assessments on the large financial institutions if the Republicans aren't successful and once again going to their rescue. It is a program that people go to voluntarily. They have a right to go purely to a private sector program. If that doesn't work, they can go in here. It has not helped everybody. The fact that some people didn't get a modification here, I regret, and I wish we'd given them more power, but it doesn't mean they are worse off. A few were worse off. Nobody quoted has said a majority were worse off. I hope the program is continued.
Time has expired. Gentlewoman from Illinois is recognized.
I yield to the gentleman from North Carolina for such time as he may consume to close.
The gentleman from North Carolina is recognized for as much time as he wishes to consume.
I appreciate my colleague yielding, and I certainly appreciate the rhetoric used on the floor. I respect my colleagues. I respect their opinion. I think people of goodwill created this program. I really do. The intent was to help homeowners. But 2 years after the fact, we're left with the cold, hard facts that this program has hurt more people than it's helped. A federal government program that brings people in, destroys their credit, takes their savings, and at the end of the day, takes their home. It offers hope, but it isn't able to deliver it. It's false hope that this program delivers. And I would point to the Special Inspector General's report from January 26, 2011. On page 11, a combined total of more than 792,000 trial and permanent modifications have been canceled. I would also point my colleague to the Treasury Department's monthly report on their housing programs. The trial modifications that are canceled, those are the individuals that are brought in, given a verbal modification, and strung out for a period of months, some 3, 6 months. I've had constituents tell me that they've been in this trial modification period for up to a year. And at the end of the day, these people are kicked out after their savings has been taken, and they're left with nothing, not even their home, not their credit rating, not their savings. And it's a federal government program that's doing this. This is so objectionable at its core. And I have my colleagues on the other side of the aisle say that they're bleeding heart liberals, right? And they're making their arguments. Well, let me tell you if this actually burns your bleeding heart. A constituent of mine from Kings Mountain says they keep requesting the same information over and over again. They've supposedly been working with me to get approved under the Make Home Affordable modification for over 14 months now. The person handling my case returned my call to tell me that they have declined my request for modification because I was unemployed. I've never been unemployed, I've been with the same employer for over 5 years now, and that has not changed through this whole process. And after sending her the proof of my income, she now says that I do not qualify because I'm so behind on my payments. I would not be behind on my payments if they would have let me continue to pay them. Can you believe this is a federal program? If that doesn't tear at your heart, if you don't see the tears of your constituents that have been put through the ringer in this federal program, then I would say that every program must be acceptable then, no matter how much harm it's doing. And I know that we're better than that. I think the folks on the left and the right that have analyzed this program, bipartisan, nonpartisan analysis of this and research has shown that it's been a failure. And it's this Congress's responsibility to end a failure of a program and make sure the federal taxpayers don't continue to write the check. The American people continue to write the check for a program that destroys people's lives and has hurt more people than it's helped. I yield back and encourage my colleagues to vote yes on this bill.
Gentleman's time has expired. All time for general debate has expired. Pursuant to the rule, the amendment in the nature of a substitute printed in the bill shall be considered as an original bill for the purpose of amendment under the 5-minute rule and shall be considered read. No amendment to the committee amendment is in order except those printed in Part A of House Report 112-34. Each such amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report by a member designated in the report. It shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent. Shall not be subject to an amendment and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 1, printed in Part A of House Report 112-34. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk made in order under the rule numbered 1 of Part A of House Report 112-34.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment Number 1, printed in Part A of House Report Number 112-34, offered by Mr. Hanna of New York.
Pursuant to House Resolution 170, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Hanna, and a member opposed each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York, Mr. Hanna.
Thank you. This amendment would add a findings section detailing the flaws of the Home Affordability Modification Program, or HAMP. It would also state that terminating HAMP would result in significant savings for the American taxpayer. I filed this amendment during Sunshine Week, which highlights the importance of open government. In keeping with the spirit of transparency, this amendment would include within the bill the specific reasons why we should end the failed HAMP program. The HAMP program was designed to assist between 3 and 4 million homeowners. However, as of February, only 607,000 active permanent mortgages modifications were made under HAMP, while $30 billion was obligated by the Treasury to HAMP. Only $1.04 billion has been dispersed. Furthermore, the Special Inspector General for TARP reported that HAMP offers many homeowners little more than false hope and in certain cases causes more harm than good. The program does not fulfill its intended purpose of helping American homeowners. It delays rather than prevents foreclosure. This program was flawed from the beginning. According to the Wall Street Journal, the number of applications canceled so far exceeds those approved, and the number of applications continues to slow. I agree with the Journal's assessment, which also pointed out that keeping people in homes they cannot afford is bad policy. Incentivizing mortgage services to do just that exacerbates our housing crisis. Moreover, the private sector is better equipped to deal with the problem, and they have modified nearly double the number of loans themselves without government involvement. My amendment concludes that ending this ineffective program would save taxpayers $1.4 billion, That's according to the Congressional Budget Office. This is one step towards restoring fiscal discipline to our federal government. Too often, our constituents receive biased or incomplete information on the issues we are discussing in Congress, thus making it difficult for them to make informed assessments of our work. Including additional facts on the intended consequences of legislation is beneficial to the public. That is why I urge support for the HANA amendment and the underlying bill. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. What purpose does the gentleman from Minnesota seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I wish to claim time in opposition to the gentleman's amendment.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I rise in opposition to Mr. Hamlin's amendment and in opposition to the underlying bill today. Mr. Chair, the middle class is shrinking and deficits are rising because Republicans are giving a pass to special interests who cheated American homeowners and wrecked our economy. This is the 13th week of the Republican-controlled Congress. Republicans continue to ignore the people's top priority, which is jobs. Instead of working to keep middle-class families in their homes, the Republican plan is to foreclose on the American middle class. The American people sent us here to protect the dream, not to destroy it, not to perpetuate a Wall Street nightmare. Americans are standing with the American people, and Democrats are standing with the American people to create good-paying American jobs and keeping Americans in their homes. This legislation is just the latest attempt by Republican majority to end foreclosure programs to help middle-class Americans. The majority's housing plan is very simple: foreclose on the middle class. Now that millions of families have already lost their homes, their plan is to hand out foreclosure notices to everybody else. What's the Republican answer? If you lose your home to foreclosure, so be it. What's the Republican answer? If your neighbor loses their home, so be it. What's the Republican answer to if you lose your job? So be it. Mr. Chair, I'd like to yield 20 seconds to the gentleman from New York for a question I have for him. I'm offering the gentleman 20 seconds because I want to ask him a question. Would the gentleman want to answer the question? Gentlelady? Gentlelady, how many jobs does this amendment create?
This legislation is to reiterate what the Congressional Budget Office says about
reclaiming my time. The gentlelady hasn't told me the jobs this amendment's going to create. I'm here to I'll yield. How many jobs is this amendment going to create, or is this bill going to create?
Certainly a multi-billion-dollar federal program doesn't create any real private sector jobs.
Okay, reclaiming my time. No jobs is the answer from the gentleman from North Carolina. I appreciate his candor. Well, let me just finish here. Look, I asked some specific. Mr. Chairman, we're here.
The gentleman from Minnesota controls the time.
We're here for the specific purpose of trying to create some jobs and help American people create their own dream. That's about jobs. We've been here 13 weeks, and the majority caucus, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, hasn't created any single jobs. I just asked the gentleman from New York how many jobs this bill's creating, and his answer is he went off on a tangent somewhere. Now, I'm looking for some kind of a number. I'll even take an estimate. How many jobs does this bill create? And I yield, gentlemen.
When you cut federal spending, you create private sector jobs. When you tax people more, you get less private sector growth.
I reclaim my time, Mr.
The gentleman reclaims his time.
Look, we're supposed to be creating jobs around here, Mr. Speaker. We're not creating anything. The fact is, we get spin, and we get imaginary arguments, and we get failed and flawed and economic theories, but no answer to the fundamental question, which is when are the jobs going to start arriving around here? Mr. Job, it's a pretty simple question. It's a pretty simple question. How many jobs does this bill create? How many families will this bill help keep in their homes? In fact, Mr. Chair, I have 3 major studies here with me today, which I'd like to enter into the record.
Without objection.
Which state very clearly that Republican spending bill eliminates nearly 1 million jobs. The Economic Policy Institute study shows that the Republican spending bill, H.R. 1, will cut nearly 1 million American jobs. Mark Zandi of Moody's Economics says that the Republican spending bill will cut 1 million jobs. A report from Goldman Sachs says that Republican spending bill will cut nearly 1 million jobs. Why is the Republican majority against jobs? Why won't they take a moment to do something about jobs? I have a parliamentary inquiry for the chair.
Inquiry.
Does the author of the amendment need to be on the floor for his amendment?
The gentleman from New York had yielded back all of his time.
So what's the answer to the question? Is that no?
The gentleman had no time remaining.
Well, I reserve the balance of my time. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Minnesota has the only time remaining.
That's right. Well, let me close then. We've seen 13 weeks of the Republican majority. The American people made changes and expected jobs. They've gotten 0 job bills at all. What they've seen is a Republican agenda that cuts 1 million jobs. Cuts 1 million jobs. And on this critical issue of Americans keeping their homes, the Republican majority has nothing but to take away the small programs that exist. This is a shame, and I hope the American people are watching this debate today, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. All time has expired. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New York. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I would request a recorded vote.
Recorded vote is being requested pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18. Further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New York will be postponed. It's now in order to consider Amendment Number 2, printed in Part A of House Report 112-34. For what purpose does the gentleman from Minnesota seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, Congressman Quigley has an amendment at the desk, and I rise to offer his amendment on his behalf.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment Number 2, printed in Part A of House Report Number 112-34, offered by Mr. Ellison of Minnesota.
Pursuant to House Resolution 170, the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Ellison, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Minnesota.
I rise to offer this amendment on behalf of Congressman Quigley, and I yield myself as much time as I may consume. Mr. Chairman, it's important that the American people are well aware that the Republican majority has had 13 weeks to introduce some kind of jobs bill, and they have introduced exactly none. Instead, what they've done is we read the Constitution, and that's good, except for we should probably do it on our own time. And then we have pursued an effort to cut American jobs. And now that we're dealing with housing programs, in the midst of the worst foreclosure crisis since the Great Depression, the Republican majority has nothing to offer except to take away the little program that does work. The Republican majority is quick to say, oh, those 600,000 people who did get a modification, that's nothing. But to those people, that's a lot. To those people, that's home. A responsible majority would say, well, how can we double the numbers? How can we triple them? How can we help Americans stay in their home? But that's not what we have. What we have today in America's Congress is a Republican plan to foreclose on the American dream. And so Congressman Quigley offers some very common sense findings that should be contained within this legislation that point out the fact that as of February 25th, $1.04 billion of HAMP funding has been dispersed. That as of January 31st, there have been about 500,000+ active and permanent modifications, about another 145,000 active trial modifications, for a total of well over 600,000 currently active modifications. The record should reflect that, Mr. Chairman, because the record should tell the truth. The record should tell the truth, yes, about problems that need fixing, but also about the success that has happened. And it's a shame if we can't pass this very simple common sense amendment, and we need to pass it today. And I yield, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Who seeks recognition? The gentleman from North Carolina is recognized.
I oppose the amendment.
Is recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, let's talk about the substance of the amendment. If the sponsor will not, I intend to. The sponsor of the amendment, and the amendment here says that it costs about $1,500 per mortgage modification. That is, in fact, not the case. The substance of this amendment is extremely deceptive and flawed. In fact, the statistics used within it are not even the dissenting views of the Democrats on the Financial Services Committee. They're not even the views of the Treasury Department. The Treasury Department testified in front of the Congressional Oversight Panel and said that the permanent modifications under HAMP would cost about $20,000. This amendment says $1,500. On its face, it's false. I would encourage my colleagues to vote against it, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Minnesota is recognized.
To clearly correct the record, the paragraph 5 says each current active modification has cost the Department of Treasury approximately $1,518. That's an accurate statement, and I think the gentleman ought to read the documentation much more clearly, because to date that has been the cost, and it's an accurate statement. But my question is even deeper than that. What is the Republican majority going to do about the massive foreclosure crisis in America today? My question is, do you all stand by the proposition that it's just laissez-faire economics, and that while we have socialism for the banks, we have hardcore capitalism for the American people? That's the question I'd like to hear the majority answer today. But this is an accurate statement. This has been, up till now, the existing cost of Mr. Quigley's amendment for each modification. Yeah.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from North Carolina is recognized.
I would say that his dissenting views are dissenting from the ranking member of Financial Services, Mr. Frank, and his staff. $7,500 is what they claim. The Treasury Department claims $20,000. My colleagues also said that this is a little program. That's absolutely absurd, Mr. Chairman. That's absurd. It's a $29.5 billion program of our taxpayer dollars. But, you know, I think he needs to understand something, my colleague needs to understand what this program is actually doing to people. You ask my constituent from Hickory, who is in the HAMP program. We've been in the HAMP program since February of 2010 and still have no answer. We're being charged late fees, and we've been reported to the Credit Bureau. We've been in underwater since April and on trial payments for 6 months, which is only supposed to have been 3 months. We've not received an answer. Another constituent from Stanley said, we've paid payments every month, but now we're being told we're behind in payments because it was not the original monthly amount on our original loan. But it's the amount we were told to pay in 2010. How can we be behind? How can we be behind? This program, I've heard from constituents that tell the same story. It's reduced monthly trial payments. They've been rejected due to eligibility issues or lost documentation. By payments being reduced in the trial payment period, they've ended up defaulting on their mortgage. This is a federal program that has actively harmed them. I would ask my colleague to look at the substance and the facts of this program and admit it's been a failure and vote to repeal and end this program. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Minnesota is recognized.
May I inquire into the remaining time?
Gentleman from Minnesota has 2 minutes. Gentleman from North Carolina has 2 minutes.
Well, I'd like to point out that, in fact, the number $1,518 is accurate for the cost up until to date. That's how much the program has cost. Projected costs are a different matter. And I think if the gentleman digs into the facts, he'll learn that. But again, let's talk about the bigger issue at work here. We're talking about a system in which, under Republican control, we have not regulated markets, have not pursued consumer protection, consumers getting into no-doc, low-doc loans, being taken advantage of by unscrupulous individuals who the Republican majority refused to regulate under Republican majorities in Congress and in the White House. This chicken has come home to roost and has wreaked havoc on the American economy. And instead of trying to do something about it, the Republican majority is not doing anything about it. It's one thing to get up here and talk about, hey, you know what, that program isn't working very well, and here's somebody who thinks it doesn't work well. I'm quite sure that that story you read is probably true. But you know what, there's a lot of people who it did help, and more than that, why don't we fix it? What is the majority's program to deal with foreclosure? Do they have one? Or do they just have criticism for what other people propose? It's easy to be a critic. I'd rather write a critic to a movie than make one. I think making one's tougher, even a bad one. But being a critic is always easy. And the worst movie is better than the best review. So let me just say, the Republican majority has a responsibility to respond to the American people. They have a responsibility to do something about foreclosures. And I'm hoping to hear somewhere, sometime today, that they're ready to do something in favor of the American people, and I'll reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from North Carolina is recognized.
I intend to close, so I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Minnesota.
Remaining time, sir?
Gentleman from Minnesota has 15 seconds.
15 seconds. The Republican no-jobs agenda has been exposed, Mr. Chair. The American people know they haven't done anything to create jobs or to protect homes. All they want to do is criticize programs that could use some improvement. They'd rather just get rid of them altogether. Yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Chairman, how much time do I have remaining?
Gentleman from North Carolina has 2 minutes remaining.
I thank the Chair. I would say, Mr. Chairman, my colleague is right. It is easy to be a critic of this program because it is an epic failure. I yield the balance of my time to my colleague from Illinois.
I thank the gentleman for
Always recognized.
Thank you. You know what? We keep talking about the jobs, jobs, jobs. We've talked about that for several years now, jobs, jobs, jobs. What we are trying to do is to create an environment that we will be able to have the private sector create the jobs. We need to stop funding programs that don't work with money that we don't have. And out-of-control federal spending is hurting our economic recovery so that we can have those jobs. We've got a $14.2 trillion national debt. And the economists agree that reducing government spending will create a more favorable environment for the private sector growth and the ability to create jobs. We've got so much uncertainty there right now that we have got to stop the spending and stop the taxing and all the things that could happen. So exactly what unemployed Americans want and what homeowners want and need is a job and a paycheck, not a handout or another failed taxpayer government program. I would urge my colleagues to support oppose this amendment and stop talking about the jobs. Let's focus on what is the substance of these amendments. And yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. Gentleman from North Carolina is recognized.
I thank the Chair.
15 seconds.
I thank the Chair. And I would encourage my colleagues to understand that when government taxes more and spends more, it crowds out private sector job creation and growth. We're about growing jobs in this Congress, and I'd urge my colleagues to get on board.
All time has expired. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Minnesota. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the Chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment made in order under the rule.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 3, printed in Part A of House Report number 112-34, offered by Mr. Canseco of Texas.
Pursuant to House Resolution 170, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Canseco, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman for Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank my colleague from North Carolina, Mr. McHenry, for offering this bill that eliminates a wasteful and ineffective program. I'm offering an amendment to this bill that will ensure that every dime of savings that comes from terminating the program will go back to the Treasury to reduce the debt of our country. Our country finds itself in the middle of a spending-driven fiscal crisis. And back in November, the American people sent a message that was loud and clear. Stop the out-of-control spending in Washington. For 2 years, the motto in Washington was, spend now, worry later. This is unfair to future generations who will inherit a bankrupt country if we don't act. It's only appropriate that we in this Congress begin our work by cutting programs that simply don't work. The Home Affordable Modification Program, or HAMP, has hurt the very people it was intended to help by giving them false hope. In his most recent quarterly report to Congress, the Inspector General of TARP stated that the HAMP program continues to fall dramatically short of any meaningful standard of success. That, Mr. Chairman, is Washington speak for failure. The program has done nothing to halt foreclosure. In fact, home foreclosures in the United States have risen from 2.3 million in 2008 to 2.9 million in 2010. HAMP is not only a bad deal for homeowners, it's a bad deal for taxpayers as well. Every child born in America today is responsible for over $45,000 of our national debt. It is simply unacceptable for Washington to continue spending money on a program that doesn't work. And for 2 years, Washington acted as if it didn't have a spending problem. And as we look around the world at countries who now find themselves in fiscal nightmares because of out-of-control government, we have to take a look in the mirror. The most dangerous words in America right now are, "It can't happen here." But just take a look at the facts. Moody's has recently downgraded the debt of Spain, a country that is expected to run a budget deficit equal to 6% of GDP in 2011. Today, Portugal and Greece were downgraded by the S&P because of overspending and budget deficits. And now the United States is expected to run a much greater deficit of 9.8% of GDP in 2011. Admiral Mullen, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, has stated that the most significant threat to our nation and our national security is our debt. So make no mistake about it, it can happen here, and it will happen here unless something is done. I just returned from a constituent work week in my district, the 23rd District of Texas. I had many town hall meetings and conversations with constituents, and all the while I heard over and over again their concerns of our exploding national debt. Speaking with one constituent who was an example of every constituent that I spoke to, Will and Debbie grandchildren, Caitlin and Taylor, what kind of a country are they going to inherit? Certainly not with the opportunities that they had to build their small business in Fair Oaks, Texas. If we don't change course, we will be guilty of committing an intergenerational theft, the likes of which no country has ever seen. We'll be the first generation of Americans to ever leave the next generation with a diminished future. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle often feel that only government can steer our economy on the right course. But we now know just how wrong that argument is. Unemployment is at an unacceptable 8.9%, and over 13 million Americans remain unemployed. We are on track for our third straight trillion-dollar deficit, and we don't have much
to show for it. We have to put an end to wasteful spending, and we must reduce the debt for future generations. Mr. McHenry's bill and my amendment, with them we will stop wasting taxpayer dollars on failing programs and ensure that any savings from termination are not recycled into yet another program. The savings will go towards paying down our country's exploding debt, and I urge passage of my amendment, and I reserve back the balance of my time.
The gentleman's time has expired. Who seeks recognition? The gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Chairman, I have the right to close, and I'm my only speaker.
Does the gentleman wish to claim time in opposition?
No, I reserve my... Oh, yes, I claim the time in opposition, and I'm the only speaker, so I will reserve my time.
The gentleman from Massachusetts has the only time remaining.
Has the gentleman used up all his time?
The gentleman from Texas' time has expired.
Oh, I apologize. I heard him say reserve, and I misunderstood that. I will say about this amendment that it is harmless and perfectly okay for people to claim credit for what's already been done, kind of like going into a taxidermist and shooting the bear. If this amendment didn't happen, it wouldn't change. The same result would be there. But here's the result. Temporarily, this comes out of tax funds. But because it's TARP money, it's subject to a, and by the way, we passed an amendment that says it goes back to the Treasury temporarily. I say temporarily because over Republican objections, and I hope they're going to relent in these, we put into the TARP legislation language that says that in 2013, whatever hasn't been paid back from the TARP to the General Treasury will be assessed to financial institutions. What that means is that if this does have a net cost to the Treasury, in 2013, the President in power at that time will be directed to send us legislation to require that this come out of the large financial institutions. That is nothing from the Treasury. Now, I say I'm worried about it because we have had two further instances of this which the Republicans have opposed. We've just had a package of 4 bills. 2 of them came out of the financial reform bill, that financing did. Help for the unemployed homeowners and the neighborhood stabilization program. In the version of the bill that we put first into conference, that money was to be recovered by an assessment on banks with $50 billion or more and hedge funds with $10 billion or more. And Republican opposition to it killed it. So yes, it is true that temporarily now the unemployed homeowners and the neighborhood stabilization come out of the Treasury. We have filed legislation, and I just refiled it last week, but it goes back to where we were in July, that would take it from the large financial institutions. Similarly, by the way, in the financial reform bill, we had a provision that said, over Republican objections, that the FDIC would immediately assess the amount that we thought we would need for the TARP on the large financial institutions. So let's be very clear. If we carry out our promises and commitments, this money will not come out of the taxpayer, it will come out of the TARP. I can't say that it will come out of the large financial institutions. I can't say the same for certain other wasteful spending. Members on the other side insisted, for example, in overriding the objection of Secretary Gates to the second engine. Now, the gentleman from Texas voted with Secretary Gates and I appreciate that. But a majority of the Republicans voted to give him the second engine, even though he said he'd tell the President to veto the bill. People disregarded, a majority in the House on both sides, the request that the Osprey be killed. In other words, people cite Secretary Gates and cite Admiral Mullen, but we still hear on the Republican side criticism of them for trying to live up to their own words when they say, well, we're going to limit military spending. I don't think it is a reasonable policy to cite their worries about the deficit and then override them in specific cases. And we also have, of course, and here the Pentagon wanted it, and I think they were wrong. $1.2 billion my colleagues voted for. I voted against it, to spend money to build up the security forces of Iraq. You talk about money not being well spent. At its worst, I cannot imagine anyone thinking that any foreclosure program here would be spent worse than it is being spent in Iraq. By the way, the Inspector General did say he was critical of the program. When asked by the gentleman's Texas colleague, Mr. Green of Houston, he said no, he would not abolish it. He specifically said he wouldn't abolish it. He was asked that in the hearing and said no. And we have consistently heard from the other side a statistic they have never yet validated, that more people were harmed than helped. None of the people they quote say that. Yes, it's a program that's difficult because we wouldn't do bankruptcy, and we have left the voluntary decision in the hands of the private sector. That's why this argument that the private sector could do it better is so nonsensical. It is the refusal of the private sector to fully participate in this program in its full spirit that's been the problem. Yes. Yes.
Are you in favor of the amendment or opposed to the amendment?
I am indifferent. Well, I'm against the amendment.